Everybody, welcome. We're just going to wait a couple of minutes while people finish previous meetings and join today's webinar. So we'll get started in 2 minutes, 2 minutes past 10. Good, then we'll get started, guys. So welcome everybody to today's tech talk from Telefónica Tech, where we're going to be discussing data products and how they can support delivering on business outcomes and delivering success for an organization. So I am delighted to be joined by Ben Jarvis, CTO for Data and AI here at Telefónica Tech, and myself, Andy Bradley. I'm the business consulting lead within the Data and AI division at Telefónica Tech UK. We're going to talk quite candidly about our views on data products. There are opportunities for you guys to engage as we move through. So there'll be some polls, there'll be some opportunities for questions during the session. So really keen for you guys to collaborate with us as we kind of go through today, and then we'll run through some options for you guys at the end on what we want to offer as a result of today's webinar. Before we dive in, though, I just wanted to run through a little bit of the housekeeping for today. So all of the slides and recording will be made available following today's session. There is the Q&A functionality, so feel free to ask questions throughout the session. Keen for this to be interactive, and there will be opportunity at the end to ask those questions specifically to Ben and I. And everyone will be muted, so there won't be opportunity to speak. So please use the chat function to be able to go through that. First thing we want to do is understand where you guys are at the moment in your journeys with data products, how you're currently leveraging data technologies. So there will be a poll appearing momentarily in the chat, and we're keen to understand kind of where you guys are at, your understanding of data products and kind of your journeys to date with those. So keen for guys to select your votes in there, and we'll kind of use that as we move through and pitch this to what you guys are currently experiencing. Excellent. Ben, over to you.
Brilliant. Thanks for that, Andy. Yeah, so it's great to be here on today's session. And just to apologise in advance, I have been having some tech problems this morning. So if I do drop out at any point, Andy is ready to take over for me. But we're going to kick off with a discussion around some of the benefits around data products and how they can impact us from a business point of view. So I was going to put the first question to Andy. So what do you see as the benefits of data products versus some of the more traditional methods that we've seen in the industry already?
Yeah, so I think there's been a bit of a shift really. So when we're speaking to clients more and more, the conversations, you can start with a conversation that doesn't start from we need a technology platform. We're very much speaking to organizations now from the value aspect. We're speaking to people about business outcomes. We're speaking to things that a data platform can provide an organization, as opposed to the other way around, which has kind of historically been the case. And I guess from a data product point of view, it gives you that vehicle to be able to wrap that value up, so you can align a data product to something tangible within your organization. So it gives you that kind of outcome-oriented deliverable, but also from, and again, conversations that we have time and time again is challenges around data ownership and challenges around accountability in the data space. The data products approach allows you to kind of structure ownership a bit more cohesively around an entity, and gives somebody something that doesn't feel maybe as abstract as a data platform or a data source might be. You're asking somebody to own an outcome, and you're asking someone to be accountable for delivering value in an organization, which is really, really powerful. It's important to recognize as well that kind of shift, I think, in what we're seeing is that data is very much now seen as an asset in an organization, as opposed to just MI reporting or dashboards. So by being able to directly associate data to a outcome kind of solidifies that, and even optically within an organization, rather than talking about our CRM system or our ERP system, we start to talk about the value that they deliver to the organization. So you're talking more directly about the benefits of the data as opposed to the data itself. And I think from your perspective, Ben, what does that look like from kind of, I guess, more of a technical delivery point of view?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so I think from a tech point of view, obviously, historically, as data teams, we've always been very focused on the really technical elements of building a data platform. So that ETL process, ingesting data, transforming it, loading it, and then serving up to the business. But I think obviously with the data products method, it really puts the business at the heart of everything we're delivering. So rather than just focusing on what data sources do we need, how do we transform that data, and how do we deliver it as a report, we're now focused on who are the key stakeholders that we need to involve in the process, understanding what their actual business requirements are and what they're trying to achieve from a business outcome point of view. And obviously diving into some of the detail around how those processes work and what data needs to underpin that outcome that they're trying to drive, so we can then define the right solution and deliver it. But I think from a technical delivery point of view, one of the things that it really drives is treating those data products as those engineered assets that have those centralized governance standards. So rather than us just delivering a point solution, we're focusing on ensuring that we've actually got an approach to evolve that product over time, ensuring we've got the right SLAs in place so the business gets the data when they need it and it's of the right quality, but then also ensuring that the business actually know that the data exists and know what the use cases are for that particular data set. So it's all about ensuring we've got those governance standards that underpin the whole process, and ensuring that we've got that scalable process so that we can deliver these products in a repeatable way and deliver that value to the business continuously.
So that's a really good point, actually. And when you're speaking to clients, when we start to talk about data products as a kind of a proposition, how's that being received? What's kind of the feeling in the marketplace? Is it resonating? Is it kind of an approach that people think, why haven't we been doing this for 10 years?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of hype in the industry around data products, and you go onto LinkedIn, you'll see lots of people talking about it as a really abstract concept, but there's no real understanding of what it actually is and how it impacts the business. So I think that when we're talking to clients, what we try and take it back to is everything we do as a data team should be centered around delivering some kind of value to the business and delivering some kind of outcome with that data set. And that's essentially what data products is about, is having that business outcome focus and then having that repeatable and process so that we can deliver those data products in a repeatable way and ensure that the business actually gets value from the data.
Yeah, no, definitely. And when I'm speaking to people, as I mentioned before, kind of more and more, those conversations have been pivoted away from a data conversation, and it's more about what they're trying to achieve as a business. And we're then able to talk about how data is a vehicle from which they can use and gather insight to be able to get the value that they believe they can get. That ownership piece, again, I mentioned it before, but that's really, really important to organizations, in that there's a recognition that people don't want to own it. There's still the feeling from a lot of people that it's IT's problem, data is IT's to own, as opposed to the people who actually make use of that information. So out in the organization, those individuals that know the data inside out, that understand the context of that data and are able to apply it to their day-to-day jobs, they need to be closer to it. They need to be the owners of this information. And by positioning it more as that product methodology, it makes it a little bit of a simpler step, I think, to talk around. And in my world, around that adoption piece, it's an easier conversation to frame adoption around something that adds value. So if we're able to talk about, we need you to take ownership of this data product because it directly drives this particular deliverable, be it increase in sales, be it an efficiency drive within customer services, that ability to, I'm a call center agent, I can see client details more clearly, I can see order histories from a retail point of view, I know how they interact with us previously, having that access quicker and being able to talk in that sense, as opposed to we're going to bring 3 different systems together that you can view. It makes the adoption process easier as well, because people are actually able to very easily associate various different elements together. So the concept becomes far less abstract than maybe we've seen historically. What I want to ask from the audience as well, Ben, is just in a couple of words in the chat, if we can identify what the biggest challenges in your world from a data point of view are right now. It doesn't have to be data product related, but it'd be interesting to know what challenges you guys are facing, just in a very short anecdote that we can discuss, and we'll kind of come back to those in the chat in a moment and talk around them. But yeah, I think generally speaking, when we talk about data products, I've found that it lands better. I'm finding that clients seem to resonate more with that than kind of a platform or technology conversation. There is stats out there that CIOs are now more inclined to look at the way businesses operate than kind of chuck technology at problems. So we're seeing a shift there. I think around 40 to 60% of CIOs are now prioritizing operating model design over introducing new technology. And that in itself lends itself really nicely to the data product approach, because it is that center on outcomes, that center in value, that's showing that businesses are really moving forwards in a kind of a new direction, but a recognized direction in terms of what organizations are trying to do.
Yeah, and I think there's one of the other sort of changes we've seen is that now the business are becoming a lot more data literate. They kind of understand that they need data to function as a business and to be successful. So I think from our point of view, working on a data initiative, we're starting to be engaged by some of those more business focused stakeholders. So previously we might have been engaged by a CIO or CTO who knows they need a data platform and wants to do something with data. But now we're seeing that shift towards us being engaged by, say, a CFO or a CMO who's got an actual business problem and wants to use data to help solve that problem. So I think it's that kind of change across the industry, and that people now understand that data is an asset and it can assist them. That's helping us to sort of embed these approaches and use that business focused approach to delivering data for a platform.
Really. And we've seen this working now with some of our clients, haven't we? So we've got existing clients in our client base where we've implemented or worked with them on a data products approach to data development. Can you give some examples and put some colour around some of the clients we have worked with on some of these and where we've seen real benefit?
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, we've worked with clients across a number of industries who are starting to adopt this approach. So one example is a manufacturing company, and they came to us because they were looking, they knew that they weren't exploiting their data and actually getting that value from their data sets, and wanted to use it to drive that competitive advantage and drive more efficiency across their business, so they can be more competitive against some of the other manufacturers out there and ensure that they're driving the highest margins and they've got that ability to be the most competitive on price. So they came to us with that problem, and we worked with them to understand where data could start to impact them as a business and understand what some of those high value use cases are to focus on first. And then we worked with them to start to understand how they'd set their data team up for success. So what kind of capabilities do they need from a governance point of view? What capabilities do they need from a business change point of view? And all of those other elements that are needed to surround this process to make it a success. And then from that, we started to implement those high value use cases and started to get that engagement with the business and start to drive that value forward. And some of the other clients that we've worked with, so one is in entertainment, and they're looking to improve their customer journey and make data at the heart of their customer journey, so they can start to do some more predictive analytics and start to leverage tools like AI to drive that value on top of their data. So they adopted the data product approach, where they could spin up multiple product teams and have that standardized governance model and standardized approach across all of those teams, so they could deliver in a really repeatable way and start to deliver that value really quickly and start to drive those key outcomes from a business point of view. And then we've also worked across a number of law firms who are generally very focused on financials and getting that understanding how they're performing from a financial point of view, but starting to flip that around and start to have that focus on what you're actually trying to drive from a business point of view and what kind of outcomes are you trying to drive from that data and what does the business actually want from that data. And then from that, we can start to look at how we can deliver it from a technical point of view. But I think this slide that we've got on the screen now kind of shows what we're trying to do really well, in that it's about taking that data, combining it with that business outcome. And then we could be delivering any kind of technical solution, whether it's an analytical model, machine learning model, or could be something more Gen AI focused, like taking some unstructured data into a vector database. And then from that, we can start to build that strong data foundation that can then be used to answer those analytical questions, but also start to answer some more predictive questions or integrate data with other applications or AI agents. So it's about giving the business that kind of pick list of data sets that are tied to specific outcomes, and then having that ability to deliver that really quickly in a repeatable way, but also bring the business on that journey to actually adopt it and ensure it's used.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because obviously businesses now have more and more data than they've ever had previously. So having focus is sometimes a real challenge. So there's so many things that you can tackle with the data that's available in organizations these days. I know we work with one client which was more focused around efficiency and actually driving improvements internally around how efficient they were in their kind of, because this was a distribution organization, a logistics business. So that was really, really important to them around that efficiency piece. And by building a data product around kind of efficiency, it is a laser focus for the business and clarity on what that information is then used for. As I say, I think when you've got so much information available now, it's very easy to start down one road and then consider or identify something and then kind of pivot and go in a different direction. Well, now that's great because you get that breadth of analysis capability, but by providing a steer from an organization point of view, it means that the deliverables are very directly related back to what that business is trying to achieve. So when an organization is driven by efficiency, having products with KPIs and OKRs that are directly associated with that drive, it means that that product delivers upon that. So any analytics that happen, any outputs, dashboards, reporting that we do, any, as you mentioned, those Gen AI models are all steered in that direction. So it provides more of a laser focus on what an organization's trying to do, and it's really explicit in what they're trying to do. So I think that's really helpful. I think one point I wanted to cover off with you, Ben, as well, was kind of based on some of the things we've talked about already around the benefits of data products and why organizations should go that way. There were people on the call today who were thinking, well, how do I start the journey? So how do I start building data products in my infrastructure, or how would I scale? So I know from our poll at the start, there are people who are already experimenting with data products, which is great to hear. How would they go from a position of starting on that journey to being able to scale that to being a kind of a business benefit and a way of working that organization can adopt moving forwards?
Yeah, so I think obviously the most important thing is to bring the business into the loop on everything we're doing from a data point of view. So from one of the best things to do is to sit down with the business and understand what are their biggest challenges, like what takes them the most time to do in their day-to-day role, what the kind of processes cause the most costs in the business, and start to understand where their real pain points are and what their real priorities are. And that could be, having a workshop with them, or it could be sitting next to them as they do their role and starting to, understand the day in their life and understand where those pain points are. Then I think from that, it's about choosing those high value use cases. So it's picking one of those, pain points for them and starting to whiteboard out what a potential solution could look like. And then moving very quickly into a process where we start to deliver a prototype and start to deliver something of value to them, so we can then refine it and expand on it going forwards. But I think ultimately what we want to do is get to a point where the business isn't just going around putting data into Excel or pulling data into Power BI desktop and tools like that, and throwing that data around the business and trying to build their own sort of cottage industries. It's about building that trust in you as a data team, so they know that they can get the value from your team and you can drive those outcomes for them. And then also giving them those tools so that they can start to use that data in a meaningful way and get value from it. And then from that, you kind of get that buy-in and you get that sort of close working relationship with them, and you can move things forward and help to embed this approach. But I think the key thing is, from a business point of view, it's not making the business feel like you're doing this to them and you're sort of imposing a data platform on them and saying that they need to work in this. It's about sort of building that partnership with the business and working with them to understand where their problems are and understanding how we can solve them as a data team. So it's about making those outcomes explicit and ensuring that we understand what we're actually driving for them, and we tie everything we do to some kind of value.
So I think that point on that relationship's really, really key as well. So I think we mentioned that kind of at the start of the call was around the feeling that IT own data and that it's an IT problem, but having that kind of relationship and partnership with the business and involving them at every step in the journey, it kind of blurs the lines a little bit between the data team and the organization, and that recognition that, in effect, whatever a data team does is always driving to deliver business value. And the closer you can get to an organization to do that, it kind of, even not, from optics point of view from the business, if they're being involved in that process, there's a feeling that they are more likely to own it. I think, from particularly in my world, when we talk about adoption, it's that awareness of the work that's taking place, kind of a knowledge sharing approach. So making sure both sides of that are considered when you're working through the development of data products, where you iterate through that. So you can build out a data product, but we know that that's not going to be fit for purpose for the next 5 years. That's going to need changes. That's going to need rework. That's going to need tidying up as new data becomes available, or as understanding develops, and as business needs change. But by having that relationship directly between the two areas, you can kind of have a more open dialogue as well between the teams. Because what we see quite a lot is that the data team is very disjointed, and it doesn't necessarily feel that the business have kind of a feeling themselves that they're involved, or that they own it, or that they're driving that. It very much feels like it's being done by IT to the business. And I think when we're talking around data products is one example, but even more generally than that, having that closer relationship is always going to be helpful when you're moving forward with any kind of design at scale. Did you want to touch on any of the points in the slide we've got on screen, Ben, around when we're talking about scaling or how to configure data products, the things that we consider the success criteria of doing that?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so as we've mentioned, from a delivery point of view, it's key to have those standard governance, that standard layer of governance that applies across all data products, so that you're delivering something that's consistent to the business, and delivering something that the business can actually get that value from. So we have an internal set of standards that we're starting to adopt with clients, and refine to suit those individual clients, just to give them that sort of starting point on this journey. But some of the key elements that we called out in that are things like ownership, so ensuring that there's a key owner within the business community who can actually be the champion for that data product and ensure that it's aligning to these standards, but also ensure that they're the one that's driving the business to use it, but also driving the data team to and evolve that data product over time, and ensure that there's an approach to develop it going forwards, because we don't want this to be a one and done thing. We want it to be something that evolves over time. And then it's about discoverability. So there's no use having lots of really nice data sets if the business don't know they exist. So it's about having this data product in the data catalog, so the business know it exists, they know where to find it, how to get access to it, and they understand what the use case is for it and how to actually get that value from the data. Then it's about the quality element. So obviously, if the data isn't trustworthy, we're immediately starting on a bad foot with the business. So it needs to have that set of criteria, so we understand, what level of data quality we've got. The business can understand where there are quality issues and what the impact of those issues is. And we have that measure of the overall quality of the product, so we can track that over time and fix those issues as they come up. And I've kind of touched on this from an ownership point of view, but it's about having that adoption and ensuring that the data product is valuable, and ensuring that we're collecting some data on how it's being used, and we're getting that feedback from the business, and essentially building that feedback loop, so they give us some feedback on what's working and what's not working, and we can start to build a roadmap to continuously improve it and evolve it over time. I think it's about moving from that project-based mentality, where it's like you've got a fixed budget to deliver this and it's a one and done, and moving more to that product-based mentality, where we're building something that's going to evolve over time and going to be refined and going to evolve to suit the needs of the business.
That's a really, really interesting point, actually. So the kind of the concept of a product owner and real, true agile product development has been growing and developing over the last 10, 15 years, maybe more. That shift into having that kind of same approach and driving the same value with data is really all we're talking about here. We're just talking about the same agile approach to be able to deliver the value quickly to an organization, but in the data space, as opposed to with kind of software development, which has maybe been the kind of focus for that before. So I don't think nothing we're talking about in the data product world is new or particularly innovative. It's just a recognition that there is a process that works in software development that adds value to an organization. So why not utilize some of those same approaches and practices around data and try and deliver that value more quickly to your client base in an organization. I think we've got a kind of an example where, I don't want to call it traditional thinking, but kind of that approach around development of data programs around a data platform and bringing in additional data, where we worked with the client in the past around kind of a 2-year strategy and roadmap for onboarding data, and kind of in that more traditional sense of we need to bring as much data into a central platform as possible, and then make that available to the business to try and democratize that data asset. And we work with them to define a number of use cases around, how is that data going to be utilized in the business, which would then drive and prioritize the roadmap for bringing in those data sources. Now, if we think back 2 years, maybe 3 years, that approach was widely recognised as a sensible approach, and was one that we adopted quite broadly. However, in those particular programs, well, one thing we noticed is that there wasn't that business alignment. So there wasn't the recognition of how those use cases were actually adding value in an organization, but also how are they delivering upon our objectives of an organization. So that disconnect, it became more and more apparent, and benefit of hindsight and all that, but a data product approach within that organization, and as part of that 2-year program, I could see that there would be huge benefits from taking that approach, because it would very directly associate the roadmap of what we were delivering, associate those 10 use cases to tangible data products that we could have assigned ownership within the business to drive and be accountable for those. And then this data product at scale side that we've got on the screen at the moment, adopting all of that into that program, then there would have been significant benefit for that organization taking that route. So it's very easy for us to do that with benefit of hindsight. But I think this is the ability for us to do that and consider some of our previous programs where this approach would added real benefit, is where we're starting to see the benefit probably more than we otherwise would have done, because we can recognize very clearly the benefits of doing it. I think when I was sharing the link for the webinar to try and get people signed up for it, I'd mentioned that the traditional data strategy was dead, and it was intentionally provocative, because I wanted to get people signed up today. But ultimately, what that means is that from a data strategy point of view, we would often talk about the business drivers and the outcomes that an organization is trying to achieve. And then when we talk about the technology strand of that data strategy, sometimes the links between the two are a little bit blurred or a little bit abstract. So we would be suggesting technology changes. So be it the introduction of a enterprise data platform, produce that single source of truth that we always talk about and we always hear about, that we want to derive a single source of truth in a business. And that's great, but why are we wanting that single source of truth? And I think that's really, really important to recognize that when we talk about single source of truth, the reason we want that is because we want everyone to be able to answer the questions they need to answer. And a lot of that is done by knowing what the business is trying to achieve. So being able to associate that data to a business goal, which you should be doing from a data strategy point of view, is really, really important. So I would say that our data strategy methodology has adjusted in line with what we talk about around data products, because we now know that data products are a vehicle to deliver the data strategy. So we don't have that blurred line between the two now. It's very, very clear that if we outline 5 objectives in a data strategy, you bet your bottom dollar there's going to be at least 5 items in our data product list that are directly associated to those objectives. And that's really, really powerful from a strategy point of view, because it just makes it land. Because if people say, well, how are you actually delivering that part of the data strategy? So, well, we've got data products that will show it. We can show you the KPIs we've got associated with them. We can show you the reports that hang off the back of them. We can show you all the information and the context that drives that towards what we're trying to do as a business. So it solidifies both sides. So it solidifies your investment in data, and it solidifies your direction around your strategy that you set for an organization. So I think there's real benefit from both sides of that. I think that we've spoken quite a lot, haven't we, about what data products are, the benefits and stuff like that. But if you were to distill that down into just a few sound bites to the audience today around how do we, as data specialists or people in the data sphere, go on a successful journey with data and data products, what would those sound bites be?
Yeah, so I think there's a few key things. So the first and the most important is having that clear ownership. So having, for each of those products, having one person in the business that can be that champion and be that owner and be the one that's accountable for making that product a success. Because I think without that, all of this falls down, and it's never going to move anywhere in terms of getting that buy-in from the business. Then I think it's about having that really strong stakeholder mapping. and alignment. So ensuring that we're understanding who the key players are in the product that we're delivering, so we understand how they need to be engaged in the project, and we make sure that they're engaged throughout that process and have their voice heard. Because if we treat it like an IT-led project where we're going off for 6 months, delivering a technical solution and coming back to the business and saying, does this work for you? We're never going to get to the right outcome. So it's about having them involved constantly throughout that process and ensuring that we've got that really good engagement. Then I think the other side of it is about us delivering value early. So with that previous example, if we go away for 6 months, we deliver something and it doesn't quite hit the mark from a business point of view, then there's no point in us having spent that 6 months. So I think from a technology point of view, things have moved on now to a point where we can get some data into the platform really quickly, and we can start to show some value really quickly, and at least get something into the hands of the business, even if it's really basic and it takes some refinement and has some rough edges that we need to sand off. But it's about showing them something really quickly so we can then work with them to refine it and they can understand the art of the possible in what we're delivering. And I think the final piece is around having those consistent standards. So making sure we've got that good governance foundation, we've got those standards that are on the screen around how we deliver data products, and we're doing it in a consistent way. Because otherwise we can get into a situation, particularly with some of the larger enterprises that we work with, where they spin up multiple product teams and they're all working in completely different ways and all using completely different approaches. And then you don't get to that consistent sort of shop front for the business to start to consume that data. So we want to make sure we've got that consistency across the board, and we're getting everyone to adopt that same set of standards and in a consistent way.
Yeah, it's the MVP point's really interesting, isn't it? Because I think if we think back to some of the programs of work that we've done, when you pitch a data platform and you say it's going to take us 18 months to build, and you've got to make an investment of 6-7 figures, if you're a CDO, CIO, and you've got to then take that to the board, it's very difficult to evidence business value. It's quite challenging to articulate and say, well, the single source of truth is worth £2 million to this business. It's very difficult to do that. And with the advent of cloud and the growing simplicity really in provisioning infrastructure and getting things set up and being able to work quickly, means that the MVP approach and having an example data product that does drive business value, and you're actually able to say and go to the board and say, well, actually, we can give you some business value within 3 months for 100k as opposed to 2 million. It's such an easier way of delivering a business case to the organization, because there's tangible value quickly, and then the scaling piece becomes simpler because you've demonstrated value. So the challenges around adoption, the challenges that we see often around resistance, sometimes from people thinking that their jobs are at risk because of new technologies, or people thinking that there's a huge amount of investment coming in and we'd never get the return on that investment. By doing that a bit more piecemeal and directly associating to an outcome, it makes that journey simpler. It means that people who may be resistant see value much more quickly and are brought into the journey, open up more to the data teams. So you often see that is that initial reluctance to share disappears because people recognize that actually you're not there to take away their job, you're there to enrich their roles. One thing I've often spoke about in the past is that I speak to people in organizations who are labeled as analysts or engineers, and actually what they do is they do the same mundane tasks every day. So they do simple data processing because the processes aren't where they need to be. What we're trying to do is we're actually, with a lot of this work, is it's to allow them to do their role more efficiently and more effectively. So an analyst should be, from a data product perspective, if we've got an efficiency data product, let's say, they should be doing their analysis to drive efficiency. So they should be looking at opportunities to be more efficient, as opposed to, I move data from one spreadsheet to another spreadsheet, and I then load that into Power BI and I spit out a report that we PDF and we share with 15 people who might look at that or they might not look at that. So it's a repositioning, and it's a recognition of people's skill sets in an organisation that we're actually trying to kickstart really with a lot of this stuff. So I from my view, in change adoption world, that's really, really important that we get value quickly.
Yeah, 100%. And it takes me back to a conversation I had with a client, and I think it was last year, where they were a business that wasn't in a great place, and they were going through a number of challenges, and they were looking at ways to resolve some of those challenges that they were having. And they came up with, they engaged us because they were looking at master data management as the solution to some of their problems. And they were like, we want to implement a master data management solution, and that's going to solve all of our issues, and it's going to fix the business basically. And when we actually drilled into the conversation, it was like, so how is MDM going to help you as a business? Like, what actual outcomes is it going to drive, and what is it going to solve? Because if you go to somebody in the business and say we're going to implement MDM and it's going to solve all of your problems, they're not going to have a clue what we're talking about. Where if we reframe it to say, if we get a single view of our customers, we can understand how those customers are interacting with us, and we can understand what touch points they've got with different parts of the business and improve that customer journey for them, which in turn increases customer satisfaction, but also increases our revenue. Then that's a much more palatable conversation with them, rather than us coming to them and saying we're going to do something with data and that's going to fix all of your problems. So I think it's about reframing everything we talk about from a tech point of view to have that business outcome and have that understanding of what we're actually trying to achieve from a business point of view to help them on that journey to being more successful.
Yeah, no, it's a really good point actually, and something that maybe we haven't considered as much before. So there's always this talk around data literacy and businesses not being data literate. And you know what, that could be because businesses aren't positioning it in the right way. So when you talk about data and then you chuck a data platform at them that's got 5 billion rows of data in, and you say, there you go, we've delivered you a single source of truth. You're now data literate. You can go away and use that information. That doesn't add value. When you can talk in it to the point that you've made around something that actually delivers value, and where we can talk anecdotally about how it adds the value. So I always go back to the point of where we've worked with major airports and stuff in the past, and I will have workshops with various people in the organisation say, tell me what a passenger is. And I will ask 10 people and I will get 10 different answers, because there are different definitions. And we've all been in those meetings where someone presents some numbers and says, we've got, I don't know, £1 million of sales this month, but somebody else has run the same analysis and they've got £500,000 of sales. And actually the session isn't about how do we grow our number. The session becomes about whose number's right. So actually you waste time by not positioning things directly towards business value and being able to contextualize that information to something that actually adds business value. So I think the point I'm trying to make is that what we can actually do as well with data products is simplify the data literacy journey. So because we're framing it that with what that data is supposedly for from the business angle, the distance between understanding data and data principles and the business outcome is significantly smaller. So it should be more tangible and more understandable from people in an organization to be able to associate the two together and understand what they're supposed to be doing from their perspective. So I think there's multiple aspects of this that are really, really helpful.
Yeah, and I think we've all been in meetings where we've had a session of the business and someone's flashed up a architecture diagram that's got data factory, blob storage, Databricks, Fabric, all of those components on it, and said to the business, this is what we're delivering for you, and they just don't have a clue what that is and what impact it's going to have on them. Where if we talk about it in terms of what it's actually going to do for them and what problems it's going to solve, then that helps improve that data literacy, because they start to understand what value data is bringing to them, and then they start to have more ideas around how data can help solve some of their problems. So I think that's the thing, is from a data literacy point of view, it's not necessarily about understanding all of those technical terms and understanding what ingestion is, what ETL is, what a lake house is. It's about getting them to understand, this is what you've got, all of this data, this is how it can help solve your problems, and then from there you can start to get into the conversation of, you know, how do we actually solve that problem, and how do we implement a solution that's going to solve it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it should be that the business are able to come back to the data team and say that the data product doesn't solve the business outcome or the business need that it was supposed to. So rather than trying to frame it and say you're missing X table from X data source, or we need additional technology, the business can talk in business terms because they have a recognition of what that's trying to achieve. So there isn't that jump into it, like you say, understanding ingestion or patterns, or even the infrastructure that underpins it. None of that really matters to them. They can talk to the data team from a business outcome perspective, and that's understood on both sides of the coin. So I think there's real benefit there. I think that's been for me, that's been a really helpful chat. So I'm hoping that the people on the call have found it useful as well. I think it's worth us just very quickly reflecting on some of the things we've talked about. So if I just kind of use the slide material that we've gone through, the idea of that data product structure is to use the product as a vehicle for business value. So that alignment of data activity to what the business is trying to achieve. So some of the things on the diagram on screen there around involving the right people at the right time. So bringing in your business stakeholders so that not only do they feel involved, but what you deliver to the business is understood by the business and usable by the business. So getting that context and being able to associate that back is really, really important. That line up with the requirements piece. So what is it that we're trying to do? So the business requirements may come from the business, but you may also be deriving business requirements from strategy. So you may be getting that from overall business objectives that you're trying to seek, from interviews, so anecdotal information that you're receiving from the organization and direction of travel, all really, really important. I think the other key thing really to pull out of this particular slide is that MVP that we've mentioned as well. So deliver value quickly to demonstrate the benefit of process. So we've all been in those situations where projects feel long-winded and you lose people in that journey. So this whole concept of change fatigue that I see a lot with people is mainly because they're being asked to change things, but they don't actually see anything. So nothing actually changes. So they don't see a benefit for a long time. Iterating through a product approach means that you can deliver value quickly and fail fast. So we talk a lot about fail fast. So if you've missed the mark with your data product, people are involved, they can give that feedback, and you can kind of iterate through and deliver the value. So that's what we're talking about, kind of that initial approach. So trying to industrialize that. Ben talked a lot around this business concepts into data products piece. It's important to recognize that data products can take various forms. So a data product is not a single entity. A data product does not describe a single thing. A data product can take various forms. It could be a report, it could be a data mart, it could be anything within an organization, but in effect, it's a selection of data that delivers value on a particular business goal. Is probably the simplest way to put it. And by using an approach like this, where we take the information, we associate that directly to an outcome that we're trying to see in the business, and then developing something that's reusable and is recognized across the business in whatever way it is then utilized, whether it be through an agent, a user, a feed into another process, whatever it might be, there is that recognized direction back up the channel to an outcome. So there's a direct relationships between the two. And then the final thing we spoke about is that scaling of data products. So considering on that wheel all those different aspects, so you could use those as a checklist. So as you're building out your data product, use those things. Ask yourselves those questions: is my data product accessible? Is it interoperable with other data products that are relevant? Is it easily understood? Can I associate it directly to value? All those kinds of things are really, really important. So as you scale your data product ecosystem, that's really important to consider all those things as we scale. I guess the last question I had for you, Ben, was if people on the call have looked at this and they're really interested in proceeding with their own data product journey, how can we help them do that?
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, off the back of this call, we're offering a free discovery call with us, so we can start to open up that discussion and understand what is it the business is trying to achieve, and where do you think that data is going to help them? And from that, we can start to take that into a data product conversation and understand what kind of outcomes they're trying to drive, and start shaping those up as use cases. So off the back of this session, feel free to reach out to us, and we're happy to set those calls up and start having that discussion with you, and shaping how those products can look, and how you can start to get on that journey to driving value from your data.
Yeah, I think that whenever we do those type of discovery sessions, we learn a lot about the way businesses work, and it's often quite a good forum for people, because we may start on one topic wherein that conversation would evolve into talking about something else. If I think back to a session that I had, we were talking about how they could they developed two. They were labeled as data products, but it was basically two 50-page PDF reports that they would distribute to the business. And they recognized that there was a lot of shared information. And the initial driver of that conversation was, how do we go from two 50-page PDFs that somebody has to manually configure into one manual 50-page PDF, which isn't driving business value. However, during that conversation with us, we were able to kind of talk and peel back the layers a little bit to understand what they were trying to do. And actually, that was a housing association, and they were looking at IoT and how they can support their residents better. So by the end of that call, we were considering, how can we put IoT devices in the home? So how do we put one on a bathroom light switch in an elderly person's home, so we can monitor, does that get turned on at 8 a.m. every morning when that elderly person's going to the toilet, or do we put them on the kettle so we know somebody's made themselves a cup of tea in the morning? Things like that, where we were trying to evolve a conversation around what their business objectives were. So what do they offer as an organization, and linking that directly back to what they could do around data products. So those conversations are always super, super helpful. Just before we move on in the deck, I'm keen to share another poll in the chat for everybody. So based on kind of the stuff we've gone over, would be really helpful for us to understand how confident you all feel progressing that data product journey. So feel free to vote on the poll. It should be visible to you all now. And yeah, as Ben mentioned, we're keen to offer the follow-up discovery conversation, where we can talk to you about what are your drivers as an organization, what are you trying to achieve, and then associating those use cases back to data products. And we can work with you on methods of prioritizing those. How do we associate that directly to value? So I think that's sometimes difficult. So when we talk about data products, how do you turn that into tangible business value? So when you're defining business cases, how do you define a business case that can outline an ROI? And we can talk to you and work with you on those things and help you define what that route forward might look like. So that's something we'd delighted to offer on. I'll open the floor to any questions that anyone may have, or anything people want to suggest on those things. While we're waiting for those potential questions to land, I just want to touch on a couple of other things that we've got coming up at Telefónica Tech. So the Surrey Azure user group is taking place, and will be taking place in a walkie-talkie office again. I think it might be the second or third time we've hosted the Surrey Azure user group. So feel free to register for the September session, working with Jonathan Deloyer and Jamie Pullinger from within Telefónica Tech and their guest speakers. So please sign up to that for anything and everything Azure user group based. And then it's worth us highlighting upcoming tech talks. So we've got Matt Gordon, who's our head of Power BI, talking to you about Power BI and Copilot. Ben will be doing the end of year review in December. We've also got Gareth Richards, who's our Databricks lead, talking around Genie AI and how you can make use of that within data platforming. And we'll also be doing a bit of a roundtable at the end of the year, kind of like a year in review towards the end of the year as well. So keep your eyes peeled for that for that coming out as well. Let me just check if we've got any questions. Nothing in the chat. Ben, is there any closing comments from yourself?
No, I think that was all. And yeah, I hope that was a really useful session for everybody. And if you've got any questions on this, or want to have a conversation about how you can make this approach work for you, then feel free to reach out. I think it's always difficult at the moment to cut through some of the hype and understand how you actually do these things in practice. So we're happy to have those conversations.
Awesome. Cheers, Ben. Cheers, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. And we hope to hear from you soon. Thank you.